The dust from the stagecoach settled like a veil across the horizon as Hope Tyler clutched her meager belongings, watching the only transportation for miles disappear down the road. Standing alone in the unforgiving Texas sun, she realized there was no turning back, not to Boston, not to her family's opulent mansion, and certainly not to the life they had prescribed for her. At 21 years old, she had chosen freedom over fortune, and now she would have to live with the consequences. Hill City, Texas, 1876, was not what Hope had imagined when she fled her family's suffocating expectations. The main street stretched before her, lined with wooden buildings that had weathered countless seasons. Men in dusty hats gave her curious glances as she made her way toward the only establishment that showed signs of life the Wayfarers Inn. "Rooms 50 cents a night, meals extra," said the innkeeper, an older woman with gray-streaked hair and keen eyes that missed nothing. She looked Hope up and down, taking in her fine traveling dress that, despite the journey, still spoke of Eastern wealth. "You got family here, miss?" "No," Hope replied, placing $2 silver on the counter. "No family at all." The woman's eyebrow arched, but she said nothing as she slid a key across the worn wood. "Room 3, breakfast at 6. Hope climbed the creaking stairs, feeling the weight of every step. 3 weeks ago, she had stood in her father's study as he presented her with what he considered her future a marriage contract to Bartholomew Whitfield, a business associate 30 years her senior with cold eyes and colder hands. "You'll be Mrs. Whitfield by month's end," her father had declared, not asking but telling. "The arrangements have been made." When she refused, her mother had wept, her father had raged, and her 3 brothers had looked away in uncomfortable silence. The final blow came when her father struck her name from the family Bible. "If you walk out that door, you are no longer a Tyler," he had warned. "Your name will never again be spoken in this house." Hope had walked out anyway, selling her grandmother's pearls for train fare west. Now, alone in a sparse room with only a narrow bed and wash basin, she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. Morning came with the sound of hammering from somewhere down the street. Hope dressed in her simplest gown, though even that marked her as an outsider, and ventured downstairs. The dining room held just 3 other patrons, an elderly couple who nodded politely and a man in a dusty black coat who appeared to be the local doctor. "Miss Tyler," the innkeeper called, gesturing her over. "If you're planning to stay in Hill City, you might want to know there's work at the general store. Old Mr. Parker needs help with inventory and accounts." Hope thanked her, surprised at the kindness. By midday, she had secured the position at Parker's general store, a position that came with a small room at the back of the establishment. "Can you cipher?" Mr. Parker asked, peering at her through spectacles. "Yes, sir. I was educated at Miss Pembroke's Academy in Boston." "Don't need fancy schooling to count inventory, but I reckon it don't hurt none," he replied with a chuckle. "Start tomorrow." For 2 weeks, Hope worked from sunrise to sunset, learning the rhythm of the small town. She discovered that Hill City had been named for its founder, Jeremiah Hill, who struck silver in the surrounding mountains before being killed by Comanche raiders in '59. The town had survived drought, raids, and the war between the states, clinging to life where many similar settlements had withered and died. It was on a sweltering Tuesday when she first saw him tall and lean against the afternoon sun, dismounting from a dappled gray horse with the easy grace of a man who'd spent more time in the saddle than on solid ground. His dark hat was pulled low, but she caught a glimpse of eyes as blue as the Texas sky when he glanced her way before entering the sheriff's office. "That's Zachary Alvarez," whispered Mabel, the 17-year-old daughter of the blacksmith who occasionally helped at the store. "Folks call him the Ghost Rider. Keeps to himself mostly, but Sheriff Jenkins trusts him. They say he's the best tracker this side of the Pecos." "Alvarez, is he Mexican?" Hope asked, realizing immediately how ignorant she must sound. His pa was. Ma was from Tennessee. He rides for the Rangers sometimes, but mostly does his own thing. Been gone nearly 6 months this time. Hope found herself watching the door of the sheriff's office, curious about the mysterious rider. When he emerged an hour later, she busied herself with arranging a display of canned peaches, stealing glances through the storefront window. As if sensing her gaze, Zachary Alvarez paused, looked directly at the window, and tipped his hat with the barest hint of a smile before mounting his horse and riding toward the livery stable. "Mighty interested in our local celebrity, ain't you?" Mr. Parker observed with a knowing smile that made Hope blush furiously. "I was just curious about a new face," she defended, though unconvincingly. That evening, Hope sat on the small porch behind the store, writing in her journal. The day's heat had finally broken, and a pleasant breeze carried the scent of sage and distant rain. The sound of approaching footsteps made her look up, surprised to find Sheriff Jenkins, a barrel-chested man with a silver mustache, standing at the edge of the porch. "Evening, Miss Tyler." "Mind if I have a word?" "Of course not, Sheriff." She closed her journal, suddenly anxious. "Is something wrong?" "Got a telegram today from Boston." He pulled a piece of paper from his vest pocket. "Seems someone's looking for a young woman matching your description, name of Tyler." Hope's heart sank. "My father," says he represents the Tyler family of Beacon Hill, man named Whitfield, Bartholomew, of course her father would send him. "What did you tell him, Sheriff?" "Nothing yet." He studied her face. "You in some kind of trouble, Miss Tyler?" "Not the kind you're thinking." Hope took a deep breath. "I left Boston to avoid a marriage. My father had arranged it without my consent." The sheriff nodded slowly. "Figured it might be something like that. Well, I reckon a woman has the right to decide such things for herself." He refolded the telegram and placed it back in his pocket. "I'll wire back that I haven't seen anyone by that name." "Thank you," Hope whispered, relief washing over her. "Just so you know," he added, "Zach Alvarez is heading out to the Anderson place tomorrow. They need help with some rustlers." "He'll be gone a week or more." Hope blinked, confused by the sudden change of subject. "I'm not sure why you're telling me this, Sheriff. Just thought you might like to know." With that enigmatic statement and a touch to his hat brim, he left her alone with her thoughts. The next morning dawned with an unusual coolness that promised a reprieve from the Texas heat. Hope was arranging a shipment of new fabric when the bell above the door jangled. She looked up to find Zachary Alvarez standing in the entrance, his imposing figure blocking much of the light from outside. "Mr. Alvarez," Mr. Parker greeted from behind the counter. "What can I help you with today?" "Need some supplies," he replied, his voice deeper than Hope had imagined, with a slight drawl that hinted at his mixed heritage. "Heading out to the Anderson spread." As Mr. Parker assembled the requested items, Zachary's gaze fell on Hope. She felt her cheeks warm under his scrutiny, but met his eyes with a steadiness that seemed to surprise him. "You're new," he observed simply. "Hope Tyler," she replied, extending her hand as she'd been taught. "I've been in Hill City for 2 weeks now." He removed his hat, revealing black hair that curled slightly at his collar, and took her hand. His palm was calloused but his touch gentle. "Zachary Alvarez. Most folks call me Zach." "Mr. Alvarez helps keep the peace around these parts," Mr. Parker explained, returning with a sack of coffee beans. "When the Rangers can't spare the men, Zach picks up the slack." "I just do what needs doing," he said with a shrug, releasing her hand. "Boston," Hope blinked. "I'm sorry." "Your accent. You're from Boston." "Yes, though I'm trying to leave that behind." Something flickered in his eyes, understanding, perhaps. "Sometimes where we're from follows us whether we want it to or not." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of another customer, and Zach turned his attention back to his supplies. When he finished his transaction, he nodded to Hope. "Miss Tyler." Just that a simple acknowledgement, but something in the way he said her name, like he was testing the sound of it on his tongue, made her heart beat a little faster after he left. Mr. Parker chuckled. Never seen Zach talk that much to anyone, let alone a lady he just met. He barely said anything, Hope protested. For him, that was practically poetry. The week passed slowly. Hope threw herself into her work, learning the business of the general store and gradually making acquaintances in town. She attended Sunday services at the small white church, where Reverend Adams preached about forgiveness and new beginnings in a way that seemed directed specifically at her, though she knew that was impossible. She wrote letters to her youngest brother, Thomas, the only one who might understand why she had fled. She never posted them, knowing they would likely be intercepted by her father, but the act of writing helped ease her loneliness. It was nearly 9 days later when Zachary Alvarez returned to Hill City. Hope was sweeping the boardwalk in front of the store when she spotted him riding down the main street. He looked weary, with several days' worth of beard shadowing his jaw, but he sat straight in the saddle. Their eyes met briefly as he passed, and he touched the brim of his hat in greeting. That evening, as Hope was closing the store, the bell jangled once more. She looked up to find Zach standing in the doorway, freshly shaved and wearing a clean shirt. "We're just closing," she said, then immediately felt foolish for stating the obvious. "I know." He shifted, and for the first time, she sensed uncertainty in his demeanor. "I was wondering if you might join me for supper at the hotel restaurant. They serve a decent steak on Thursdays." Hope was so surprised that she didn't immediately answer, and a shadow crossed his face. "If you'd rather not know," she interrupted quickly. "I mean, yes, I would like that very much. I just need a moment to change." 20 minutes later, they sat across from each other at a corner table in the hotel dining room. Hope had changed into her second-best dress, a sage green that brought out the gold flecks in her hazel eyes. She was acutely aware of the curious glances from other diners. Zachary Alvarez was not known for his sociability, and she was still the intriguing newcomer. "How was your work at the Anderson Ranch?" she asked after they had ordered. "Successful. Caught the rustlers, returned the cattle." His answers were clipped, but she sensed it wasn't from rudeness but rather a natural economy of words. "Is that what you do? Catch rustlers?" "Sometimes I track, find things or people that are lost." He took a sip of water. "Sheriff mentioned someone from Boston was looking for you." Hope stiffened. "The sheriff seems to tell you a great deal. We've known each other a long time." He studied her face. "You don't have to explain, we've all got pasts." "What's yours?" she asked boldly. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "My father was a vaquero on a ranch near the border. My mother was the daughter of the ranch owner. They fell in love, married against her family's wishes. They died during a fever outbreak when I was 14. "I'm sorry," Hope said softly. "It was a long time ago." He paused as the server brought their meals. "Sheriff Jenkins took me in, taught me to track. Been doing it ever since." They ate in companionable silence for a while before Hope found the courage to share her own story. "My father arranged a marriage for me to a business associate. A man older than my father with a reputation for cruelty to his servants and his previous wife. When I refused, my father disowned me, struck my name from the family Bible." Zach's eyes darkened with anger. "A father should protect his daughter, not use her as a bargaining chip." In his mind, he was securing my future. She pushed her food around her plate. "I sold my grandmother's pearls and came west. I didn't have a plan beyond getting away. Yet here you are, making your own way." "Trying to," she corrected. "I'm not sure I'm suited for frontier life." "You seem to be doing just fine." He gestured to the people around them. "Folks speak well of you, say you work hard, don't complain, treat everyone with respect." Hope was touched that he'd asked about her. "And what do you think, Mr. Alvarez?" "I think," he said slowly, "that anyone who would disown Hope Tyler doesn't deserve to speak her name." The way he said it, her name, like something precious, made her breath catch. No one had ever spoken about her, or to her, with such quiet intensity. Over the next few weeks, Hill City buzzed with speculation about the unlikely pair. Hope continued working at the general store, while Zach took on tracking jobs that kept him away for days at a time. But whenever he was in town, They would share meals, take walks along the creek that ran behind the church, or simply sit on the porch behind the store, talking until the stars emerged. Hope learned that beneath Zach's reserved exterior was a man of deep principles and unexpected gentleness. He taught her to ride properly, to identify the tracks of different animals, and even, somewhat scandalously, to shoot a revolver. A woman alone needs to be able to protect herself, he insisted when she expressed reluctance. I'm not alone anymore, she replied without thinking, then blushed at the implication of her words. But it was true. In the span of 2 months, Hope had created a life for herself in Hill City. She had friends Mabel from the blacksmith's family, Ruth, the innkeeper who had first welcomed her, and even cranky Mrs. Hollister, who taught piano to the town's children and had been delighted to discover Hope could play. And then, there was Zach, neither friend nor suitor, but something undefined that was becoming more essential to her with each passing day. The summer heat had begun to give way to autumn's cooler promise when trouble arrived in the form of a well-dressed man stepping off the afternoon stage. Hope was delivering a package to the dressmaker when she saw him, Bartholomew Whitfield, looking as out of place in Hill City as she once had, surveying the town with undisguised disdain. She ducked into the nearest doorway, heart pounding. How had he found her? The sheriff had promised to deny knowing her whereabouts. Making her way back to the general store through the alley, Hope found Mr. Parker sorting mail. I need to close early, she told him, her voice shaking. A man from Boston has just arrived, and I can't see him. Mr. Parker's kind face creased with concern. The man your father wanted you to marry? Hope nodded, surprised that he knew. But of course, in a town like Hill City, little remained secret for long. Go out the back, child. I'll send word to Sheriff Jenkins. Hope fled to her small room, gathering her meager savings and the few possessions she couldn't bear to leave behind. She had just finished when a knock sounded at her door. Hope, it's Ruth. The innkeeper's voice was hushed. Sheriff sent me. Said to tell you to go to Widow Cooper's place at the edge of town. He's sending word to Zach. The Widow Cooper was a reclusive woman who lived in a small cabin just beyond the town limits. Hope had only met her once, when delivering medicine from the doctor. With a whispered thank you to Ruth, she slipped out the back door and made her way through the gathering dusk, praying she wouldn't be seen. The widow greeted her with surprising warmth. Been expecting you, Miss Tyler. Sheriff said you might need a place to lie low for a bit. I'm so sorry to impose. Nonsense. Any friend of Zachary's is welcome here. He saved my Thomas during the war, brought him home to die in his own bed instead of some field hospital. I owe that man a debt I can never repay. She showed Hope to a small bedroom. You'll be safe here. 2 agonizing days passed. Hope remained hidden in the widow's cabin, jumping at every sound. The widow brought news that Bartholomew Whitfield had taken a room at the hotel and was asking questions all over town, showing a daguerreotype of Hope and offering a substantial reward for information leading to her whereabouts. Nobody's talking, though, the widow reported with satisfaction. Folks here don't cotton to outsiders coming in and making demands. On the 3rd morning, Hope woke to the sound of horses. Peering through the curtains, she saw Zach dismounting, his expression grim. The widow let him in, and Hope heard their murmured conversation before he appeared at her bedroom door. Are you all right? He asked, his eyes scanning her face as if checking for signs of harm. Yes, just frightened. How did he find me? Hired a Pinkerton detective. Man followed your trail from Boston, asking questions at every stop. Zach's jaw tightened. I met your Mr. Whitfield. He's not my anything, Hope said fiercely. No, he's not, Zach agreed, his voice softening. Sheriff's been stalling him, but he's getting impatient. Says he has legal documents from your father giving him authority to bring you back. He has no authority over me. I'm of age. That's what the sheriff told him. Zach hesitated. Hope, I have a plan, but you might not like it. I'll do anything to avoid going back with him. Even marry me. Hope's breath caught. Of all the solutions she had imagined, this was not among them. What? As a married woman, you'd be under your husband's protection, not your father's. Whitfield couldn't legally force you to return. You're proposing marriage as a legal strategy. She couldn't keep the hurt from her voice. Zach stepped closer, taking her hands in his. No, Hope. I'm proposing marriage because I love you. Have since I first saw you arranging those peaches in the window, looking like you belonged in a fancy painting instead of a dusty general store. I was planning to ask you proper-like, with a ring and all, but this situation forced my hand. Hope stared at him, speechless. In the month she had known him, Zachary Alvarez had never spoken so many words at once, and certainly never about his feelings. You love me, she finally managed. More than I thought possible. His blue eyes held hers. But if you don't feel the same, we can find another way. I do feel the same, she whispered. I've been falling in love with you a little more each day. Relief washed over his face, followed by a smile that transformed his features. Then marry me, Hope Tyler, not just to solve this problem, but because we belong together. Yes, she said simply. Yes, I will marry you. The plan was set in motion immediately. Sheriff Jenkins visited Bartholomew Whitfield at the hotel, informing him that Hope Tyler would be at the church the following morning if he wished to speak with her. What the sheriff didn't tell him was that Hope would be there to marry Zachary Alvarez. The night before the wedding, Hope couldn't sleep. She sat on the widow's porch, watching the stars and thinking about the strange path that had led her here. 6 months ago, she had been a proper Boston society girl, destined for a loveless marriage of convenience. Now she was about to become Mrs. Zachary Alvarez, wife of a half-Mexican tracker in a Texas town smaller than her father's estate, and she had never been happier. The wedding morning dawned clear and cool. Ruth arrived with a dress she had secretly been altering, a simple creation of ivory satin with lace at the collar and cuffs. Mabel brought wildflowers for Hope's hair, and Mrs. Hollister volunteered to play the piano. It seemed the entire town was conspiring to make the hasty wedding as proper and beautiful as possible. Something borrowed, the widow Cooper said, pressing a delicate handkerchief into Hope's hand. Was my mother's. By 10 o'clock, Hope was ready. Sheriff Jenkins arrived to escort her to the church, where Zach waited with Reverend Adams. Whitfield's already there, the sheriff warned, looking mighty confused to see wedding preparations. Let him be confused, Hope replied, newfound confidence in her voice. The small church was filled with townspeople, all the friends Hope had made during her months in Hill City. As Mrs. Hollister began playing a wedding march, Hope walked down the aisle on Sheriff Jenkins' arm, her eyes fixed on Zach, who stood tall and proud at the altar. Just before she reached him, a figure stepped into the aisle. Bartholomew Whitfield, his face mottled with rage, blocked her path. This is outrageous, he sputtered. Hope Tyler, your father sent me to bring you home immediately. This charade ends now. The church fell silent. Hope looked past him to Zach, who had tensed but remained where he stood, allowing her to handle the confrontation herself. Mr. Whitfield, Hope said clearly, her voice carrying through the hushed church. My father struck my name from the family Bible. He disowned me. I am no longer a Tyler in his eyes, so he has no claim on me. This is absurd. Your father has no authority over me, she interrupted. I am of legal age, and I have chosen my own path. Now, please step aside. I'm about to be married. I forbid it. Whitfield reached for her arm, but before he could touch her, Sheriff Jenkins stepped between them. That's enough, the sheriff said firmly. Miss Tyler has made her choice clear. You have no legal right to interfere. Her father is not here, the sheriff finished, and has no jurisdiction in Texas over an adult woman. Now, you can stay and witness this wedding peacefully, or you can spend the day in my jail for disturbing the peace. Your choice. Whitfield looked around at the hostile faces of the townspeople, many of whom had stood up, some with hands hovering near weapons. Realizing he was outnumbered and outmaneuvered, he stepped aside with a final glare at Hope. As Hope continued to the altar, Zach extended his hand. When she took it, He squeezed gently, his eyes conveying pride in her courage. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Adams began, "we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. When prompted for the ring, Zach produced a simple gold band that had been his mother's. As he slid it onto Hope's finger, he spoke words that weren't part of the traditional vows. "Hope," he said softly, for her ears alone, "your family may have disowned your name, but I will whisper it like a prayer every day of our lives together." Tears welled in Hope's eyes at the tender promise. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Zach kissed her with a gentleness that belied the strength she knew he possessed. As they turned to face the congregation as Mr. and Mrs. Alvarez, Hope saw Bartholomew Whitfield slip out the back of the church, defeated. She felt a momentary pang not for the man himself, but for the family connections that his departure severed completely. Then, Zach's hand tightened around hers, and she remembered that she had found a new family here in Hill City. The celebration that followed was unlike anything Hope had experienced in Boston. The entire town gathered for a feast in the churchyard, with tables groaning under the weight of contributed dishes. There was music and dancing, laughter and tears, as the community celebrated not just a wedding, but a victory one of their own had been protected from outside threats. Late in the afternoon, Zach and Hope slipped away to the small house he had been building on the outskirts of town. It was far from finished, only 2 rooms were properly completed, but he had been working on it whenever he was in town, planning for a future he had hoped to share with her. "It's not much compared to what you're used to," he said, suddenly self-conscious as he showed her the simple bedroom with its handcrafted furniture. "It's perfect," Hope replied, meaning it. "It's ours." Their first night as husband and wife was tender and passionate, a discovery of each other that left them both breathless and wondering at the miracle of finding such love in an unlikely place. As dawn broke, Hope lay in Zach's arms, watching the light slowly fill their bedroom. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," he said, pressing a kiss to her forehead, "we build our life together. I've saved enough to finish the house and buy more land. I was thinking I might cut back on the tracking work, focus on raising horses instead, be home more." "I'd like that," she admitted. "Though I know how much you love the work you do." "I love you more," he said simply, "and there's tracking work nearby that wouldn't take me away for long." They spent the day together in their new home, planning their future. Zach showed her the land he had purchased, 20 acres with access to a year-round creek, good grazing for horses, and enough flat ground to grow crops if they wished. A week into their marriage, a letter arrived from Boston. Hope recognized her youngest brother's handwriting and opened it with trembling fingers. "Dear Hope," she read aloud to Zach as they sat on their porch in the evening coolness. "Father has informed us that you have married and will remain in Texas. While he continues to forbid us from speaking your name, I wanted you to know that I think of you often and pray for your happiness. Mother cries when she thinks no one is watching, and I believe she misses you terribly, though she won't say so. Bartholomew Whitfield has moved his attentions to the Cavendish daughter, which suggests his interest in you was purely financial. I hope to visit Texas someday when I am of age and can make my own decisions. Until then, please know that you are remembered and loved. Your brother, Thomas." Hope folded the letter, wiping away tears. "At least I haven't been completely forgotten." "You never could be," Zach said, drawing her into his arms. "And maybe someday your family will realize what they lost when they disowned you." "I have a family now," she replied, resting her head against his chest. "You and this town, you're my family." Over the next year, Zach and Hope built their life together in Hill City. The house was completed with the help of neighbors, and Zach established a small but respected horse breeding operation. Hope continued working at the general store 3 days a week, using her education to help Mr. Parker improve his bookkeeping and expand his inventory. They became known as a couple who could be counted on in times of need. Zach, with his tracking skills and quiet strength, Hope with her education and compassionate heart. When influenza swept through the town that winter, Hope worked tirelessly alongside Dr. Matthews, nursing the sick and organizing relief efforts. In the spring, another letter arrived from Thomas, this one containing a newspaper clipping announcing the engagement of Bartholomew Whitfield to Charlotte Cavendish, confirming that Hope's family had indeed moved on without her. "Does it hurt?" Zach asked as she set the clipping aside. "Not as much as I thought it would," she admitted. "I've found my place now. It's here with you." That summer, as their first anniversary approached, Hope discovered she was expecting a child. The news filled them both with joy and trepidation. "I know nothing about being a father," Zach confessed one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. "And I know nothing about being a mother," Hope replied. "But we'll learn together, just as we've done with everything else." As Hope's condition became known, the women of Hill City rallied around her, offering advice, hand-sewn baby clothes, and promises of help when the time came. Ruth appointed herself unofficial guardian of Hope's health, ensuring she ate properly and rested enough. 7 months into the pregnancy, the unexpected happened. A telegram arrived for Hope from Boston, signed by her father. It was brief and formal, but its contents left her shaking. "Your mother is gravely ill," it read. "She asks for you, come if you will, Alexander Tyler." Zach found her on their porch, the telegram clutched in her hand. "What is it, love? What's wrong?" "My mother is dying," she whispered. "Father has sent for me." Without hesitation, Zach knelt before her. "Then we'll go to Boston." "Zach, no, I'm 7 months pregnant. The journey, we'll take it slow, stay at good hotels, travel by the best coaches. I won't let anything happen to you or our child." His eyes held hers. "But I won't keep you from saying goodbye to your mother." 2 weeks later, they arrived in Boston. The journey had been long but carefully managed, with Zach insisting on frequent stops and the best accommodations they could afford. Hope had written ahead to inform her father that she would be accompanied by her husband, making it clear that they came as a pair or not at all. The Tyler mansion on Beacon Hill loomed before them, a monument to old money and rigid social expectations. Hope felt Zach tense beside her as they approached the door, and she squeezed his hand in reassurance. "Remember," she whispered, "you are my husband and the father of my child. You have nothing to prove to these people." The butler who answered the door had been with the family since Hope was a child. His eyes widened at the sight of her, rounded with pregnancy and standing beside a man who was clearly not from their social circle. "Miss Hope," he breathed, forgetting formality, "we've been expecting you." "Mrs. Alvarez now, Harrison," she corrected gently. "This is my husband, Zachary." Harrison recovered quickly. "Of course, Mrs. Alvarez. Please come in. Your father is with your mother, but I'll inform him of your arrival immediately." They were shown to the formal parlor, where Hope felt keenly the contrast between her current life and her past. The room, with its silk wallpaper and ornate furnishings, seemed excessive and stifling after the simple beauty of their home in Hill City. Zach stood straight and proud, his eyes taking in the surroundings without comment. Hope knew he was uncomfortable, but admired the dignity with which he faced this new challenge. The door opened, and Alexander Tyler entered. He had aged in the 1.5 years since Hope had seen him last, his hair now completely gray, new lines etched around his eyes and mouth. He stopped when he saw Hope, his gaze moving from her face to her pregnant belly and finally to Zach. "Father," Hope said, her voice steadier than she felt. "This is my husband, Zachary Alvarez." For a long moment, Alexander Tyler said nothing. Then, to Hope's surprise, he extended his hand. "Mr. Alvarez, thank you for bringing my daughter safely to us." Zach accepted the handshake, his grip firm. "I came for Hope's sake, sir, and for her mother's." Alexander nodded, then turned to Hope. "Your mother has been asking for you. The doctor says she hasn't much time." "What happened?" Hope asked, following her father toward the stairs. "Consumption. It progressed rapidly." He paused at the foot of the staircase. She never recovered from your departure, Hope. None of us did. Hope glanced back at Zach, who nodded encouragingly. Go to your mother. I'll wait here. The room where Elizabeth Tyler lay dying was darkened against the afternoon sun. Hope entered quietly, her heart breaking at the sight of her once vibrant mother reduced to a pale shadow in the large bed. Mother, she whispered, approaching the bedside. Elizabeth's eyes fluttered open, focusing slowly on Hope's face. Hope, is it really you? Yes, Mother, I'm here. Hope took her mother's frail hand, shocked at how thin it had become. My baby girl, Elizabeth breathed, tears filling her eyes. I knew you'd come. Her gaze traveled to Hope's stomach. You're with child. Yes, a baby due in about 2 months. Hope smiled through her own tears. You're going to be a grandmother. And your husband, is he good to you? The best of men, Hope assured her. He's downstairs. Zachary Alvarez, a former Texas Ranger. He's kind and brave and loves me dearly. I want to meet him, Elizabeth said, her voice strengthening momentarily. Bring him to me. Hope was surprised but nodded, returning downstairs to find Zach engaged in stilted conversation with her father and oldest brother, James. Mother wants to meet you, she told Zach, who immediately stood. Are you sure that's wise? James asked, frowning. Mother is very weak. It's her wish, Hope replied firmly, taking Zach's arm. Elizabeth Tyler's face lit with a weak smile when Zach entered the room behind Hope. He removed his hat and approached the bed with reverence. Mrs. Tyler, he said softly, I'm honored to meet you. You're the man who married my daughter, Elizabeth said, studying him with eyes that, despite her illness, missed nothing. The man who gave her shelter when we cast her out. Yes, madam, though Hope needed very little from me, she's the strongest woman I've ever known. That she gets from me, Elizabeth said with unexpected humor. She extended her hand, which Zach took gently. Thank you for loving her when we failed to. Hope couldn't stop the tears that spilled down her cheeks. This was the mother she remembered, gracious and loving, not the silent woman who had stood by while her father disowned her. Promise me you'll take care of her, Elizabeth continued, her grip on Zach's hand surprisingly strong. And my grandchild. With my life, Zach vowed. You have my word. Good. Elizabeth's eyes moved back to Hope. Be happy, my darling girl. That's all I ever wanted for you. The next 3 days passed in a blur of grief and reconciliation. Hope spent hours at her mother's bedside, sometimes alone, sometimes with Zach or her brothers. Even her father joined them occasionally, his rigid demeanor softening as he watched his wife fade away. On the 3rd night, with the family gathered around her bed, Elizabeth Tyler took her last breath. Hope wept in Zach's arms as her father and brothers stood in silent grief. After the funeral, Alexander Tyler asked Hope and Zach to remain at the mansion for a few more days. To Hope's surprise, her father seemed genuinely interested in getting to know Zach, asking about his work with the Rangers and their life in Texas. One evening, as Hope rested upstairs, Alexander invited Zach to his study. I owe you an apology, Mr. Alvarez, he said, pouring 2 glasses of brandy. I judged my daughter's choice without knowing you, and I was wrong. Sir, Zach asked, taken aback. I see how you look at Hope, how you care for her. I see the life you've built together. Alexander handed Zach a glass. It's not the life I imagined for my daughter, but I can no longer pretend it's not a good one. Thank you, sir. That means a great deal to Hope. And to you. Alexander asked shrewdly. Zach considered before answering. I don't need your approval, Mr. Tyler. I'm secure in who I am and what I can provide for my family. But for Hope's sake, I'm glad to have it. Alexander nodded, appreciating the honest answer. I've drawn up papers reinstating Hope in my will. My grandchild should have the advantages that wealth can provide. With all due respect, sir, we don't need your money. Hope and I manage quite well. I'm sure you do, but it's not about need, it's about rectifying a wrong. Alexander set down his glass. I struck my daughter's name from our family Bible in anger. It was the cruelest thing I've ever done. I can't undo that pain, but I can ensure her future is secure. Before returning to Texas, Hope and Alexander restored her name to the family Bible. It was a symbolic gesture, but one that brought healing to both father and daughter. "Will you write to us?" Alexander asked as he escorted them to the waiting carriage. "Let us know when the baby arrives." "Yes, Father," Hope promised, embracing him. "And perhaps someday you'll visit us in Hill City." "I'd like that," he replied, surprising her once more. "I'd like to see this town that welcomed my daughter when her own family failed her." The journey back to Texas was more leisurely than their trip east, with frequent stops to ensure Hope's comfort. They arrived home just 2 weeks before their son was born, a healthy boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined spirit. They named him Thomas Alexander Alvarez, honoring both Hope's brother and her father. The name bridged the gap between Hope's past and present, acknowledging the family she had lost and found again. Word of the birth spread quickly through Hill City, and visitors arrived bearing gifts and well wishes. Sheriff Jenkins proclaimed himself honorary grandfather, while Ruth and the widow Cooper vied for grandmotherly privileges. Mr. Parker closed the store for a full day to celebrate, declaring that Hope's son was Hill City's finest new citizen. 3 months after Thomas's birth, a letter arrived from Boston, along with a substantial bank draft and legal documents establishing a trust for the child. Alexander Tyler had made good on his promise to provide for his grandson, though he was careful to structure the gift in a way that respected Zach and Hope's independence. More surprising was a postscript indicating that he planned to visit the following spring, along with Hope's brothers and their families. "I wish to see for myself this Hill City that has become your home," he wrote. That night, as Hope nursed Thomas in the rocking chair Zach had made, she marveled at the unexpected turns her life had taken. "Did you ever imagine this is where we'd be?" she asked Zach, who sat nearby whittling a small wooden horse for their son. "Not in my wildest dreams," he admitted. "But I wouldn't change a thing." "Nor would I," she agreed, looking down at their child. "Though there was a time I thought I'd made a terrible mistake leaving Boston." "When was that?" "The day I arrived in Hill City," she laughed. Standing in the dust, watching the stagecoach disappear, wondering what I'd gotten myself into. Zach set aside his carving and moved to kneel beside the rocking chair. "And now?" Hope looked around their cozy home, at the life they had built together, and then into the eyes of the man who had whispered her name like a prayer when others had struck it from existence. "Now I know it was the best decision I ever made," she said softly. "Coming to Hill City, finding you, it wasn't a mistake. It was destiny." Zach leaned in to kiss her, their son nestled between them, a family forged not from obligation or arrangement, but from choice and love, the kind of love that transforms lives and heals even the deepest wounds. Outside their window, the Texas stars shone bright over Hill City, the small town that had become Hope's sanctuary and true home. Her family had disowned her name, but here, in this place, with this man, she had found not just a new name but a new identity, one built on courage, independence, and a love that had been worth every sacrifice.